Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC's webinar. My name is Ryan Stewart and I am your host. I'm going to give folks a minute or so to log in. While I do that, I would love to know who's out there. The format of these webinars is such that we can't see you. So I'd love to know your name, where you're logging in from, an organization you're associated with. I'll pop all this into the chat. When you do that, make sure you address it to everyone. We've made sure that it's set up so that you can address your chats to everyone. I'd also love some help. So our last webinar was about how the British Columbia Mountaineering Club and Rec Sites and Trails BC have been working together to manage heavy use at Water Sprite Lake near Squamish. And I'll post a link to that in a moment to the webinar if you want to watch it. You go back and watch that one. In the survey after the webinar, we had someone ask what are some options for managing heavy use that don't involve closures or reservations or things like that. So I would love to hear if you have any ideas for something like that. Maybe do a blog or a webinar on it in the future. And the only thing that I've heard about that seems to kind of fit with something like that is an app that I think they have down in Colorado where they are able to sort of see the live use of different trailhead parking lots, and so folks can sort of look in on that app, see what's busy that day, maybe think about where they'll go if a parking lot's looking full. But love to hear other ideas of how people are managing use, overuse maybe, in places and not using closures and reservations. So I think that'd be an interesting topic for the future. I'm going to add those questions into the chat here really quick. And we're seeing some good responses there. Lots of people weighing in. So if you're just logging in, the questions I was asking, your name, location, organization, and any ideas you have for managing overcrowding beyond closures. So there we go. And I think with that, we will get started. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. So again, my name is Ryan Stewart. I work with community engagement with the ORCBC. That includes organizing and hosting our webinars. And welcome to today's. We are unpacking the provincial government's outdoor recreation strategy. This is a plan for maximizing the potential of outdoor recreation in the province. I'll share a link to it in a moment if you want to check it out while we're going through this webinar. And our guest today is John Hawkings, and he'll tell us all about it in a moment. First, I have a little bit of housekeeping I need to take care of. I want to start off by saying that I feel privileged to live, work, and recreate on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. In the spirit of reconciliation, we have given a donation to the New Relationships Trust. It's an Indigenous-led nonprofit here in British Columbia, and it's granted more than $260 million to thousands of projects over the last 20 years. You can learn more about it at newrelationshiptrust.ca. Here's today's agenda. We'll start with a short introduction, and then I'll hand things over to our guest. If you have any questions during the presentation, please post them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I'll do my best to ask the questions during the Q&A, the dedicated Q&A session. We'll wrap things up around 1 p.m. Pacific time. Immediately following the webinar is a super short survey. Please stick around to fill it out. It really does help us do a better job with these webinars and cover all the topics that you're interested in hearing about. I'll also mention that we are recording today's webinar, and we'll be sharing the recording along with slides and any takeaways with everyone later this week. This webinar is part of a monthly series hosted by the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. We represent more than 100 members, snowmobilers and hunters, anglers and hikers, conservation organizations, and paddling clubs. It's a very diverse group. What they share is a love of spending time in nature. Our research shows that there are more than 430,000 British Columbians who are members of an outdoor club, and the ORCBC is the only organization that represents them all. We do this in many ways, including advocacy, capacity building, and education. Webinars like this one check off a bunch of those boxes. All right, let's get started. Today's speaker is John Hawkings. John is the executive lead recreation strategy and service transformation in the Ministry of the Environment and Parks. Prior to this current role, John was the executive director of Rec Sites and Trails BC. He's spent several years working on the outdoor recreation strategy, and he knows it as well as anyone. John, I'll stop sharing and I'm going to hand the screen over to you. Thanks so much for being here and look forward to learning more about the strategy today.
Thank you, Ryan. Hopefully you can all see that. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up maybe from you, Ryan. I've got heavy equipment that's decided to work outside my window, and apparently they're not taking lunch hour. So hopefully that sound is also not coming through, but it's in the background for me. Great. I kind of ran through the list of names quickly and plenty of folks tuning in, so thanks for joining. For those of you that were at the incredible Outdoor Recreation Council conference in sort of mid-May there may be a bit of repetition here. I haven't sort of done a whole new thing, so you'll get a bit of a refresher. But for those of you that weren't there, my intention is to introduce the recreation strategy, talk a little bit about sort of what it is, and perhaps provide a little bit more nuance than you might get just from reading it around how government is seeing and working on this and what it means for us. And I really intend to leave a lot of time for questions because I know that folks really value that opportunity to have a little bit of a discussion. I'm not sure exactly the format if it'll be in the chat or if folks can ask questions verbally, but we'll figure out a way to make it work. So with that, I will start by introducing the recreation strategy. We're really excited that we had the opportunity at the Outdoor Recreation Council conference in May to introduce this project that we have been working on for a number of years. Many of you will recall that in 2023, late 2023, 2024, we did a number of public engagements and recreation organizations engagements, four of them, two virtual and two in person, as well as many one-to-one engagements with stakeholders and organizations and Indigenous communities. So over the course of a couple of years, with some downtime in between, as we focused on some transformational work within the ministry, um, we were looking at what a recreation strategy is. And I think a little context that I would like to provide on this is that when we initiated our work in 2023, we had a different vision of where this strategy was going to go with respect to government and ministry priorities at the time. While I want to be very clear that we have continued to maintain those important focuses that I think are so critical to the world of outdoor recreation, including conservation and responsible recreation management. Between the time that we initiated the strategy, 2023, we had an election, a new mandate for government as well. What I would say is a noticeable shift in sort of how the province was looking at the economics and the fiscal situation, both from sort of macro, events and events within the province that really placed an economic lens on the strategy. And the reason I raise this is to say that the inclusion of the outdoor recreation strategy as a component of the Look West province's economic plan has been an important evolution and an important lens for the strategy. And so I'll reflect on that a little bit more. But the strategy is a component of Look West. For those of you that are not familiar, Look West was the province's economic plan that they released in fall of 2025. And Look West recognizes 8 sectors that are going to drive the province's economic plan. And one of those sectors is tourism and outdoor recreation, which again, I will expand on. The province sets out a vision for British Columbia as a place where outdoor recreation is a way of life, connecting people to nature, supporting health and well-being, and helping communities thrive. Central to this vision is the role that outdoor recreation has in our sort of identity as a province. We see that all you have to do is look at our marketing and promotion materials in our tourism and our Destination BC materials, and you see the images of outdoor recreation of our incredible natural spaces being so prolific and prominent. We know that outdoor recreation connects our communities to these beautiful natural settings, particularly in rural communities. Increasingly, we understand and are aware of the incredible contributions that outdoor recreation makes to community health and individual well-being. That was so evident during the COVID pandemic and the importance that outdoor recreation had for people, and it continues to be the case now. We also recognize that outdoor recreation really contributes to thriving communities. It's a reason that residents are attracted to and stay in communities. In many cases, we have examples of where outdoor recreation has really shifted communities. We see professionals, particularly doctors and nurses, moving to towns like Fernie from the U.S. because of those recreation opportunities. So that's, I think, a way that we've really tried to capture the various really critical elements of a vision in the provincial vision for outdoor recreation. There's four things that I think, amongst the strategy's 17 targets and 29 actions, there's four things that are really important that I think are fundamental to the strategy. Recognition of outdoor recreation as a sector in its own right. For those of us, and I know that many folks on this call, we've been, advocates for and involved both personally and professionally in outdoor recreation for maybe most of our lives. So this seems obvious, but recognizing outdoor recreation as a sector has not been the case previously in government, and so this is a really significant development. I think the second most important thing that this strategy does is it sets out a whole of government approach. And I'll expand on that a little bit further in the strategy, but it really brings together through a cross-ministry outdoor recreation coordinating committee that I'm chairing, 8 agencies, potentially 9, and it's a big tent, so we might get more, where we are working internally to align and to build and ensure that we're all focused and headed in the same direction. That has not always been the case. And there's already been some great relationships internal to government created around that, and we're already identifying opportunities where we can advance things. Some of the great work that we're doing with jobs economic growth around the outdoor recreation satellite account, with tourism and destination BC, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Health, and we're just getting started. As I mentioned, the strategy advances the provincial goals for economic growth, stewardship, and reconciliation. And I think there's a really important balance there that I hope and I think that the strategy got right, where we can, recognize the contribution that outdoor recreation has to community growth, but not at the cost of stewardship and conservation and advancing goals for reconciliation. And again, all things I'll expand on shortly. One of the focuses that's been incredibly important for me and for the team that put the strategy together is recognizing that there are foundational elements in outdoor recreation. You'll often hear me talk about the backbone of outdoor recreation being resource roads, particularly in British Columbia. The volunteers and the community organizations that contribute to outdoor recreation. If we focus on those foundational elements, if we have great experiences, if we have great people that are helping us to manage and maintain those great experiences, if we can ensure that the fundamental access is maintained, then those downstream benefits will catalyze the economic benefits in communities, the tourism, the health, the individual health and well-being, attracting or retaining residents. So that's been a real focus, is trying to ensure we focus on the fundamental elements. As I mentioned before, certainly this strategy focuses and has a real economic lens to it. For those of you and I know there's many folks internal to government here, so you will have heard me say that a normal strategy like this would often go through the Natural Resource Ministries Deputy Ministers Committee and then to the Environment and Land Use Committee of Cabinet. The strategy took a different route. While we engaged all the natural resource ministries, we went through Cabinet Committee on Economy and the Deputy Ministers Committee on Economy to just give you a sense of some of the lens that the strategy is getting. We believe that outdoor recreation has had immeasurable benefits to BC's economy for years, but that there still remains, opportunity to develop that sector further. Certainly, some of that expansion is in looking at how, the outdoor recreation industry, the outdoor recreation sector in BC has contributed so much to the gear and the tech manufacturers, of which there are hundreds in the province that are providing leading gear and tech for the outdoor recreation industry. One of the things that I think outdoor recreation offers that some of the other industries in the province may not is just it being so naturally distributed across the province, particularly in rural areas, where any community that is interested has the opportunity to to take on and to pursue outdoor recreation as an opportunity. As well, I think the return on investment for outdoor recreation can be exceptional. It can have shorter timelines than, say, the development of a mine or a significant industrial activity that could take a decade in terms of permitting and development, and yet we can see return on investment with much more modest investments that have such a broad range of benefits for communities. So there's a great timeline opportunity there. I've talked already a little bit about what a whole of government approach looks like, but it's more than just a whole of government approach. We're looking for coordinated leadership both within and external to government. Um, we know that outdoor recreation in BC, one of the advantages that this province has, relative to other jurisdictions, is the incredible contribution that community organizations like the Outdoor Rec Council have and continue to make with a history of longstanding organizations. Um, and so through things like the Outdoor Sector Coalition, continuing to build on the relationship with the Outdoor Recreation Council, the BC Parks Foundation, and so many other organizations, we can bring really coordinated leadership to the sector. And we're really excited about that opportunity. And so I think those two mechanisms, the Outdoor Sector Coalition and the Cross Ministry Committee, Outdoor Recreation Collaboration Committee, are two really good coordinating mechanisms. Outdoor recreation also provides a unique opportunity for reconciliation. We met with and engaged with over 30 First Nations, and then through an Indigenous outdoor recreation working group, we heard some very consistent messages from many nations. First of all, nations want to be involved and are very keen to be involved in the conversations around outdoor recreation because of the linkages that it has to conservation and stewardship in their traditional territories. It's incredibly important that outdoor recreation advance Indigenous interests around the culture and stewardship. And also we have opportunities to ensure that outdoor recreation happens respectfully on those traditional territories, and that's incredibly important to nations. We also heard from many nations that they want to expand opportunities, particularly for youth to participate in outdoor recreation, that it's provides that connection back to those traditional territories. And so, looking at opportunities for youth and increased engagement in outdoor recreation. And we also heard from nations a real interest in expanding participation in the outdoor recreation economy, whether that's through, say, Indigenous owned campgrounds, or whether that's through, providing guided experiences and other opportunities. There's lots there. So we're really keen to explore some of those opportunities. So we believe that right now, particularly because we're in a tough fiscal situation in the province, that outdoor recreation provides some really unique opportunities, and this is in fact a critical moment for outdoor recreation um, in British Columbia, and that as that economy shifts, this is sort of a time that we want to take advantage of. So we set forward a strategy that really has five priorities: to inspire action, to deliver experiences, to invest in growth, to support people, and to protect what we love. Inspiring action is really about growing awareness of the value of outdoor recreation. In a way, I've sometimes referred to this as setting the table. Um, we want to make sure that we've got a consistent framework to measure, track, and report on the economic value of outdoor recreation. But most importantly, this is where those collaborating mechanisms, those coordinating mechanisms, the cross ministry committee on outdoor recreation, the outdoor sector coalition, the relationship with groups like the Outdoor Recreation Council become so critically important. So by aligning those relationships and both internal and external to government, we have a real opportunity. Um, Having better data and better information to track and report on outdoor recreation, particularly the economic value, but not just the economic value, We're engaging with UVic and the Ministry of Health to try to better capture, health and wellness outcomes as well as reduce spending on healthcare related to outdoor recreation and so on. And then it's incredibly important that we use those coordinating mechanisms and that information to tell a really compelling story. So we're excited about that. We're going to be working with the sector to determine how best to revitalize um, an outdoor recreation advisory committee, picking up on the work of the Provincial Trail Advisory Body that was led and co-chaired by the Outdoor Recreation Council and Recreation Sites and Trails prior to COVID. And as an example, our work to launch the BC Outdoor Recreation Satellite account. And while the strategy says every 2 years, BC Stats assures us that we should be able to release the data every year and make that very shareable. So that'll be an exciting opportunity. I spoke a little bit earlier around what I call the foundational elements of outdoor recreation, and that's what delivering experiences to me is all about. It's all about the core of making sure that we have exceptional experiences for residents, for our communities, and for visitors that come to British Columbia. Um, Recreation sites and trails in BC parks are the single largest providers of public outdoor recreation in the province. But we do work alongside communities, regional districts that also provide outdoor recreation opportunities. It's important that we have a sustainable model, both from a funding and from a stewardship conservation perspective for BC parks and recreation sites and trails. And while that work has been ongoing for a number of years, we're going to continue to work on that. Um, Folks know that I've been talking about the Resource Road network and how important that is to recreation for years. We are seeing an unprecedented number of shifts in the forest industry that are impacting access to resource roads, and I know many of your communities are facing some of these challenges right now. We have a framework that is based on a very sort of a limited model of how the forest industry operates and who pays for roads. And so we have to think more creatively around how resource roads are going to be funded, who's going to fund them, what the legislative and the regulatory framework, not so much the legislative, but the regulatory framework for resource roads looks like, who is in a position to take on responsibility for resource roads and how liability is managed for that. Um, and I think that we have to be up to the task of looking at how the industry that has largely provided that access, the forest industry, is changing and what the industry interests are, so that we can be flexible and adaptive and maintain high value recreation access in the province. And part of that is tied to innovative funding models. We live in a digital world, as everybody knows, and certainly ensuring that we have a access to high quality digital information to help us plan and manage our experiences is critically important. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have one single point of contact for information around recreation sites and BC parks. Certainly for folks that have participated in outdoor recreation in the US, have seen that model between US Forest Service, US National Parks, state parks can certainly work in this day and age. And so we're excited about that and looking at how we can manage the digital experience. We know that British Columbia has an incredible number of trails that are already iconic. And we hope that we can look at how we can support those communities that are interested in promotion and development of an iconic trails program in supporting some of those endeavors. And would be a little bit of a trial where we would start small and perhaps see what the opportunities are around an iconic trails program. So that's all about focusing on those foundational experiences and making sure that we have high quality experiences for outdoor recreation in BC. We're really excited to be focusing on investing in growth in looking at how the outdoor recreation economy in British Columbia can help us to invest in growth. As I mentioned before, we recognize that outdoor recreation that having great outdoor recreation in BC has contributed to a really thriving gear and tech sector in British Columbia. Uh, we have over 100 gear companies alone in the um, Kootenay region of the province. The Sea to Sky has hundreds of tech and creative companies related to outdoor recreation. So real opportunity for small and medium businesses, and we can really make BC a leader. We understand from speaking to these companies that having real world testing environments and again having those foundational experiences have been key to decisions to set up in communities like Kimberley, like Golden, like Revelstoke and Nelson and Squamish and so on. Uh, Many of you will have heard that the province invested $1 million through the REDIP program in the core and College of the Rockies rehab and training program, which is a really exciting opportunity. We also know that working with Tourism BC and Indigenous Tourism BC, that there's a real opportunity to expand Indigenous participation in the outdoor recreation economy. And so we'll be working with tax and Indigenous Tourism BC and Indigenous communities to look and see what those opportunities are. We also understand and know, and I know many folks on this call will confirm that permitting continues to be a challenge in many areas of the province, and certainly outdoor recreation is one of them. We want to try to, we're going to work on improving permitting processes, both make them more efficient and more transparent to try and improve that process and create better business certainty to drive the economy. I think one of the biggest advantages BC has in being such an incredible jurisdiction for outdoor recreation is the incredible network of community organizations and recreation groups in the province, and it's critically important that we're able to support those groups. I've been working with the Outdoor Rec Council now for almost 20 years. This has sort of been the holy grail that we've been trying to solve. We haven't done it yet, but we know that having great outdoor recreation really depends on community and the people that do it. So we need to find a dependable and diverse funding for outdoor recreations. I think we have to be innovative and we have to be creative. Um, and we have to look at the whole of the sector in terms of who's benefiting from outdoor recreation and where there might be opportunities to find that funding that doesn't always rely on the highly fluctuating core funding in government. And we also want to support increased Indigenous involvement in outdoor recreation through working with team groups like the Indigenous Sport Physical Activity Recreation Council and other organizations that can ensure that we're engaged with Indigenous communities. I anticipate there'll be lots of questions around this one when we get to it. Protecting what we love is our fifth priority, and that is all about the stewardship and the conservation that is so critical and goes hand in hand with outdoor recreation. Throughout the engagement that we did in the strategy, we consistently heard that this remains the top priority of the outdoor recreation sector. And so we've continued to ensure that we've got our focus there. There's a lot of I think that this priority has the most number of actions out of all of them, and there's a lot of pieces here. One of the things that the Outdoor Recreation Council, and I know that as many of you have been advocating for years, is to ensure that recreational resources are incorporated into the significant framework for land use planning in the province. We believe there's an opportunity to sort of be innovative with respect to how we do that through community-centered recreational resource planning. So that would be looking at things like the FERPA framework and the modernized land use planning and how we integrate recreation values. And there's already great work underway, and there may be some folks on this call that are doing some of that great work in BC parks and recreation sites and trails. We want to make sure that we continue to focus on communicating and building on responsible recreation practices through education, through working with community, through working with groups. Some of the great work that the BC Parks Foundation does and the engagement enhancement group in BC Parks does around responsible recreation as basically our first line of trying to ensure that outdoor recreation is respectful and done with great respect. So a coordinated framework for responsible recreation, what that looks like, and how we work with our partners to deliver that. We want to continue to build on our visitor use management frameworks. The visitor use management framework that has developed by the 6 United States land management agencies that we have adapted and continue to build on here in BC. We've had great successes with that, and we want to continue to build on that. I think one of the things that we know about the visitor use management framework is it's a highly scalable tool. It can be used for very simple and straightforward work in our recreation areas, but it can also be help us deal with some of our most complex problems. So we want to continue to build on that work. And we know that monitoring, compliance, and enforcement is a critical piece of the outdoor recreation framework, and that we have to continue to expand on that work. The recent announcement that we're going to be bringing together many of the province's compliance and enforcement, natural resource compliance and enforcement agencies under one umbrella, I think is great news. It's in our ministry, the Ministry of Environment, so it'll allow us to work very closely with the Conservation Officer Service, the Natural Resource Officers, and some of those other agencies to bring a coordinated approach. And I think it also provides an opportunity for us to continue to expand on and seek opportunities to work with Indigenous Guardian programs where there's a real interest and we have a real need. So some really, really exciting opportunities there. And there's lots more that we could unpack there, but I will move on. So that is a really high level summary. I've gone over it quite quickly. You all have access. It's online. I highly recommend that you have a look at the strategy itself. There's some other great materials there that provide some linkages to some of the other work that's happening within government. Perhaps one of the sort of easiest to digest documents on the website is the Outdoor Recreation Strategy at a Glance document, which provides the priorities, the targets, and the actions in a really nice, succinct way. So I really encourage you to have a look at that. And certainly reach out if you have any questions. So with that, I think I've left lots of time for questions, but I'm really excited about this. I'm excited to have a discussion with you and talk about how we can make BC the greatest place to get outside.
Thanks so much, John. That was a great run through there, and I did look at the sort of at a glance one, and it definitely makes it easy to sort of absorb what's going on there. It gives you a lot of the key points. Let's jump right into the Q&A. So there's a few questions in there already. Feel free to add them there or in the chat. I'll just start off with one here from Nadine Reynolds, who put this in during the registration from Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative. And she's asking what the process and timeline is for implementing the strategy.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan, and in fact, one that I'm spending most of my time working on today. Um, when we're looking at the strategy, we're unabashedly have identified a number of projects that are already underway in government because we still think that they continue to be the really good ideas. As example, the parks and recreation sites and trails operating model work, the outdoor recreation satellite account, and so on. We've identified that about 14 of the 29 actions are already underway and either are we need to maintain momentum with those items or we have to sort of enhance and rescope them a little bit to deliver on the strategy itself. So those are underway and we're going to continue to do that work. One of the things the strategy does for those particular, call them actions already underway, is it really provides a strengthened mandate to deliver on those priorities. And that's important within government, as government can sometimes shift focus. So we've reconfirmed that those things like continuing to invest in the BC Parks and Recreation Trails reservation system will continue. Um, of the other areas of which there are, roughly say another 14 or 15 items that have not been initiated, we're looking at those in terms of a priority basis. We can't do everything at once. What we want to do is look at what's going to have the highest impact, what sort of resources are going to be required. And there's sort of as you can imagine, a bit of a matrix calculation that has to be done to determine what can we deliver on. So it may be that we take on some of the really, really fundamental but quite intensive capacity-wise projects like resource roads and innovative funding models, despite the fact that we know those are going to be complex and take a lot of time, but then also sort of tick off a couple of the, moderate impact, but less sort of resource intensive programs that, perhaps like launching the Iconic Trails program with our partners at Destination BC and tourism or some of those other things. So not to sort of muddle Nadine's great question, but it's going to be variable. We are going to get into implementation. We're already in implementation now on many things, and we'll be prioritizing going forward. There may be things in the strategy that are literally a year or two away from a time where we're going to be able to touch them.
And a follow-up question from Steve Jones. What type of annual reporting will be in place to help track the progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. There will be annual reporting. Let me just start there. I have not really put my mind to exactly what that's going to look like, but there's going to be an annual reporting and monitoring plan, and we will absolutely be making that a core element of the strategy. And I look forward to coming back on this webinar maybe a year from now and presenting on that. The other thing I would like to say is that really keeping the strategy on track is going, I hope, will be a focus of both that cross-ministry coordinating committee, but also whether it's the advisory committee, whether it's the sector coalition, whether it's the Outdoor Recreation Council, that part of that sort of focus will come from outside the sector as well, outside government.
Okay. Couple questions related. I've seen them kind of come up in the chat there about the Outdoor Recreation Advisory Group you just mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to be formed, who's involved, its role, those sort of things? Just unpack it a little more.
Sure. Sorry, I'm not sure if I've just lost. I can stop sharing. Hey.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we've had a little bit of experience. For those of you involved with the Outdoor Recreation Council for a number of years will know that we had the Provincial Trail Advisory Body. Folks are aware that government has many other advisory bodies. I've been having discussions. I've talked to Louise and some of the other folks about really how we can be successful. And what are sort of some of the core ingredients of a successful advisory body. Um, I believe, personally that it needs to be focused. It needs to have a clear task. I haven't seen a lot of success with sort of general advisory bodies in government. Government doesn't always sort of um, take sort of the parameters of advice have to be clear and specified for organizations. So I'm going to be working with Louise. I'm going to be working with the Outdoor Sector Coalition, my internal sort of partners and others to figure out how we can best focus the advisory bodies. One of the things that I'm thinking is that it may be more than one particular body. There may be, so we can best utilize the skills and the knowledge base of folks that would be participating and ensure that there's a focus. There may be more than one, and they may be task oriented and task focused. But that's some of the work that we're doing sort of imminently is figuring out exactly what that looks like, what the role of that body is relative to groups like the Outdoor Recreation Council and the Outdoor Sector Coalition.
All right. As I'm sure you probably guessed, there were a few folks during registration wondering about permitting Section 57 approvals, partnerships with rec sites and trails in BC. You mentioned it before that there's efforts going on in streamlining and making that more efficient. Can you tell us a little bit? I think there's even a pilot project with the Section 57. Can
Mhm.
you tell us a little bit more about some of those efforts and what the aim is there. Is it sort of to have, a minimum standard of service or something like that?
Sure. Yeah, obviously, I know that this is of critical importance to so many folks that the permitting process can be frustrating. Um, as I mentioned a moment ago, there were a number of actions that were sort of underway or in a sense predate the strategy. And the government's permitting reform initiative exists outside of this strategy, but I think the strategy provides a little bit of focus and again enhances the mandate for that. So there has been work ongoing within both BC parks and recreation sites and trails to improve permitting overall. Certainly, many of you will be familiar with the work that Recreation Sites and Trails has done, and you referenced it a moment ago, Ryan, the Section 57 pilot, which looks to more automate the process to ensure that there's more transparent tracking and that there's a more formalized system for Section 57, so folks can know, what is the status of their 57. Um, One of the critical things around timelines is that sometimes that might mean getting to know faster. One of the things that we know about permitting is that people will say, well, a permit has sat for 5 or 6 years. And sometimes the reason for that is that we have sort of not wanted to make a final decision as we try to work a permit through the system. But in some cases, it would be more helpful just to get to a final decision, even if that decision isn't favorable. So more transparency around decision making and improving the efficiency of the system. We are under the current fiscal climate, it's unlikely that we're going to see a bunch of increased resource capacity. In other words, more permit folks in the permit teams. So we've got to figure out a way to improve the process, and that's going to be the focus. And that focus is going to be aligned with much of the work that's going on across the natural resource sector, including working with our colleagues in WLRS and things like the Adventure Tourism Hub.
All right. You anticipated this one too. Several people asking about funding. You have the Invest for Growth as one of those pillars. You talk about exploring innovative funding approaches. So, two questions for you. One, can we expect any increased funding for outdoor recreation, whether it's for the Outdoor Recreation Fund or just clubs in general, money that they can access, budgets for rec sites and trails, things like that?
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that question. First and foremost, uh, you know, funding decisions in government are made at the highest levels, and certainly at the political levels and not my level. So I cannot definitively say there will or there won't be funding. Certainly, the fiscal climate right now inside government is that increased voted appropriations, which is effectively our program budgets, are highly unlikely. There's no indication that that's the case. And in fact, I think the government's been very clear in the public sphere, suggesting that we're continuing to find efficiencies across government. Um, I think one thing that is really important context is that between BC Parks and Rec Sites and Trails, there's over $100 million spent annually. When we look at contributions into the outdoor recreation space from programs like REDIP, the Off-Road Vehicle Fund, and others, there's additional millions that get spent. Um, in addition to that, you have, hundreds and hundreds of full-time equivalent folks that are contributing to the work. So we have a lot of resources that are being allocated towards outdoor recreation. And one of the things that we need to do is ensure that we are being effective in prioritizing how that money is spent and how those folks are spending their time. That's certainly an opportunity that exists through the Cross Ministry Outdoor Recreation Coordinating Committee. So if we have grant programs, and this may surprise some folks, but probably the most significant funders of trails and core recreation infrastructure outside of BC Parks over the last decade has been the REDIP and rural dividend programs through Jobs Economic Growth and through some destination development funding projects through the Ministry of Tourism. So how are we working with our partners in those ministries to align, those funding programs that do arise from time to time with, some of those sound management principles that we're trying to deliver in rec sites and trails and BC Parks. So that's one piece of it. With respect to, so I guess my answer to the will there be more funding is that I think that we have to, for the medium and short term, assume there won't be, but we need to be efficient with the funding we do have. With innovative funding, you know, there's always a fundamental question, and we're not unique in terms of being a jurisdiction in North America, looking at the question of who pays for outdoor recreation services. Is it the general taxpayer, is it the user, or is it a combination of both? And who's benefiting and who's contributing? And I think that we all agree that it's likely a combination. And certainly where there's opportunities to for user pay for enhanced services, we've heard loud and clear from folks that they're willing to pay for those services, but they have to be enhanced services. So we need to look carefully at our funding models and how they're applied. Um, as well, when we say if we take resource roads as an example, for over 100 years now or somewhere around that many years, we've seen the industry largely providing incredible recreation access through the resource road network. But as industry shifts, I think there's an opportunity for us to look and see who else is benefiting from maintaining high value recreation access and whether or not there are different opportunities through tourism funding to support high value recreation access. Probably not in its entirety, but certainly to contribute. And so that's some of the innovative funding that we'll need to look at.
All right. Let's grab one of these questions from the Q&A. And I've seen a couple talking about insurance and general liability for clubs, I think, for the most part. Are there ways to facilitate volunteer organizations accessing commercial general liability or insurance in general? Are these things that you're looking at, ways for clubs to kind of lessen that sort of burden on them?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say that British Columbia is probably the most progressive jurisdiction in North America for um, risk management with respect to clubs and organizations through the Stewardship Partnership Insurance Program. So that's the $2 million third-party liability insurance that we provide for partnership groups. Um, and but we need to continue to work on that. The liability question, of course, is very complex. There's been some recent court precedents in BC which tend to suggest that the the liability regime and the Occupiers Liability Act continues to be a robust protection for recreation organizations. But it continues to be particularly, as we see more injuries and so on in the backcountry, more use of the backcountry, more extensive use, something we have to pay attention to. And I know it continues to be a heavy cost for our community organizations. And again, when we talk about sustainable, dependable funding for organizations, we have to recognize that one of the reasons that funding is so critical is so that they can ensure they have really robust risk management approaches. I think as well, when we talk about the resource road issue, certainly the liability around resource road maintenance is an area that will require some of our focus as we dig into that particular problem.
All right. Rob McDonald asks, moving past issues around liability inertia and status quo thinking can limit sustainable development. How do we get past the we've always done it in this way bureaucratic mindset, especially as it relates to public-private partnerships and addressing things like roads and trails management on Crown land? We heard several great examples of this at the conference where private businesses are willing to leverage their own resources to improve trail infrastructure, but we're running up against roadblocks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, I think two things. It takes me right back to the very first priority around inspiring action and the importance of that narrative. I think, again, I'm on a call here. I don't know how many folks are on this call, but I suspect that I'm figuratively talking to the choir here. We all understand how beneficial outdoor recreation is to our communities, to ourselves. But I don't know that it's as widely held or understood as some of us may think. So, communicating that narrative, that outdoor recreation really does benefit communities is so important. And we're seeing, and I think the emergence of the Outdoor Sector Coalition, which already includes so many businesses, that are producing, gear and tech and everything else, and as well as guided venture tourism companies and so on, that there really is recognition that there are so many more beneficiaries than simply the participants themselves in outdoor recreation, whether that's even administrators of the healthcare system. So I think, I don't know that I have the perfect answer for Rob's question, but continuing to build the narrative, again, the outdoor recreation sector being recognized as an economic sector in the province is part of that. And hopefully, where people better understand what that return on investment is, we see increased willingness to invest in some of these things. But it's not going to be an easy or a quick road. We need to continue to build. I will say, though, that, there are some states, and I particularly think about Utah and Colorado, where they're seeing such incredible, well, and Arkansas for that matter, where the governments and industry and community and business are really, really buying into the promise of outdoor recreation.
One of those things those states all have in common is having an outdoor recreation office or whatever they call it in each
Hmm.
state. That was one of the things talked
Hmm.
about in the strategy as a possibility of something to pursue. Can you talk a little bit about that and the plans there?
Yeah, so many of you are familiar, and I know that the Outdoor Rec Council had, I think it's, I'm missing the name, I think it's Steve, from the National Office of Outdoor Recreation in the US on last year. And he recently presented to the Outdoor Sector Coalition again. But yeah, 25 now or 26 of the 50 US states have a coordinating office of outdoor recreation, which really acts as far as I can tell, it's a bit varied across the states, but as a sort of central coordinating hub to sort of bring together various places in state governments and outdoor recreation organizations to kind of coordinate the province's approach. I think that we've seen states like Colorado and Utah really, really buy into the outdoor recreation economy and pass some really interesting legislation. And in fact, the U.S. has passed some pretty significant federal legislation around outdoor recreation recently. In the case of Arkansas, you have some incredibly wealthy benefactors in the Walmart family who have invested significantly in outdoor recreation, particularly mountain biking in Bentonville, which, clearly can be a game changer. We don't all have a Walton family in our communities. But I think what it demonstrates is that when government gets behind an idea, it doesn't always have to be money. There can be legislative change and policy change that can really you know, really move the needle.
And is that something that we'll see in the next few years?
It's something that we're going to explore for sure. We, again, BC is unique. We need to look at what an advisory committee body might look like, the current existing governance with the Outdoor Rec Council and the Sector Coalition and all these other bodies, and see, would an office, a coordinating office of outdoor recreation make sense in our current context? How would it, where would it sit? How would it be funded? Is this the right time where we're sort of under fiscal constraints? So certainly it's a very live conversation and one that we're very interested in exploring.
All right. Kim Smith's wondering about public consultation and planning, trail strategy for BC. I think you've mentioned it a couple times. Talked about collaborative planning between trail groups, government, First Nations. Is there a planning and consultation aspect laid out in the strategy on a broader scale than this advisory group?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of a whole bunch of sort of governance bodies that meet once a month and you're trying to force an agenda. We want to be effective, we want to be efficient and respect people's time. So certainly I want to ensure, and to Steve's point, that we have an advisory body and that there's some accountability around the strategy on an annual basis. But I want to make sure that that's efficient and effective. I don't know, with 29 incredibly broad reaching actions that, sort of a consultation process would be the most efficient use of our time. We did the consultation. We've heard lots of feedback from folks that those 29 actions hit the mark. Now let's get on with getting them done and let's make sure we've got some checks and balances in driving this forward.
I just saw, just to go back to our last little point there about the outdoor recreation offices, that there's none in Canada,
No,
just US states, right? No provinces have
others
one.
may know more than I do, and I know those of you that were at the Winnipeg conference may know better, but I'm not aware of any sort of thing in Canada. There was a number of years where we had a cross-provincial territorial sort of trails management committee. Even that I'm sure has faltered a little bit as far as I understand, but I'm not aware that exists in Canada. Of course, the Canadian sort of governance system, levels of government is very different from the US in terms of the where sort of the state and sort of national land management authority rests. So can't always compare ourselves to the US.
Yeah. I see Louise has added in there that Manitoba does have a trails office, part of their government.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's quite the same overarching, more focused on the trail
Mhm.
aspect. Karina Kinsberg from Power to Be and Brenda Lanahan at BC Complex Kids in the Village of Tassus. They were both wondering about kind of inclusivity in a general way, I guess, kind of combining their questions. So, what are the goals of this strategy when it comes to accessibility and inclusivity and sort of, I saw something in there about it, BC becoming a leader there. So, can you talk a little bit
Mhm.
about what that looks like and how we get there?
Yes. So one of our strategies is to position BC as a leader in accessible trail-based recreation by investing in accessible and adaptive trail experiences to reduce barriers to participation and diversify accessible recreation opportunities. And again, this is one of those strategies where we want to continue to sort of support and build on the mandate that already exists within BC parks and increasingly recreation sites and trails. BC is continuing to invest in accessible trail-based recreation. But more importantly, I think that we are seeing that it after a number of years now of that focused investment, we're seeing it as being sort of built into much of the work that we do. We want to continue to expand on that and continue working with what we call the Triple E program in BC Parks to just build out that incredible opportunity that we have that remains really an important part of our work.
All right. I see Craig here in the Q&A. He's asking about the bike packing cycling sector, wondering how that fits, building out these trails. I wonder if this sort of fits with that iconic trails sort of idea, and examples like the Inland Railway Corridor, the Sunshine Coast Trail, KVR Corridor. And what do you see there when it comes to those iconic trails? How will they be identified? How will we sort of build out that infrastructure to ensure they're sort of at those priorities that you were mentioning?
Yeah. Well, let me just first say, and Louise knows this because her and I have had a few chats about this. I think that bike packing and gravel biking is just this like limitless opportunity. I'm so excited to see some organizations now coalesce around this idea, because we have incredible opportunities with our incredible resource road network. I think it's a game changer. Um, so I'm excited to see what kind of evolves. I think with the Iconic Trails program, it's really we're looking to work with you to say what could this look like. I've started to think a little bit about what sort of some minimum criteria would be. It's got to have communities that are engaged and interested. It's not going to be the sort of thing that we want to force on communities that aren't ready. There's going to have to be some minimum criteria for what sort of what the key ingredients of what makes an iconic trail. And I think the opportunity there is to set a little bit of a bar and provide an opportunity for communities to try and reach that bar so that we can then promote some iconic trails. But again, I can think of a handful just off the top of my mind, top of my head, kind of gravel biking routes or bike packing routes that could just be exceptional in this province.
Um, we got so many questions here. It's hard to keep track of them all. Nadine Reynolds, regarding planning and integrating the resource planning, how might the experience with the Northwest strategy support integration? Is this a live conversation in government with lots of change and investment in planning processes over the last few years?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nadine, and perhaps you and I can just chat offline because there's a lot to unpack, and I think we've got like a minute left. But we are engaged, as our folks in the Conservation Recreation Division are very engaged in Northwest Planning Strategy as well. I think there are now, I don't know how many land use planning processes going on where we are engaged in sort of building what I'll call a recreation chapter into those planning processes. And I had some great conversations at the conference with some folks from academia around what some work might look like to help us kind of build out that framework a little bit. But yeah, we're kind of learning by the day as we see sort of shifts and changes in the way the regulatory and the sort of policy regime for that land use planning happening.
And Jenna, I've missed a couple of her questions. She was asking about enforcement and compliance and strengthening that. Can you just quickly talk a little bit about what that will look like when you think about that aspect?
Yeah, I honestly I don't know, Ryan. I mean, as we see this amalgamation of compliance and enforcement agencies in the Ministry of Environment, I think that presents an opportunity. Certainly, we know that the demand for compliance and enforcement across the entire natural resource sector way outstrips capacity. But we need to work both internally within the enforcement resources we have, which is, a large number of BC Parks rangers, and recreation officers, and then look at our partners in the CO service, the Natural Resource Officer Service, and try and um, sort of figure out where that opportunity is. And to be fully transparent, we just haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but we do know that that's a significant gap.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we are at 1 o'clock here, so we'll wrap things up. One last question for you, John. And a couple of people sort of asked this in a bit of a way. I always like to kind of give a takeaway and action item for folks. What would you say to all the outdoor clubs out there? What should they do with the strategy? What do you want them to sort of take away or do next?
Well, I think that, again, that inspiring action is such a critical piece. I know that, we understand that the outdoor recreation we have in this province is so fundamentally been built on the work that communities have done. And we really want to continue to support that work, stay involved, stay engaged, being engaged in the work that we do with the Outdoor Recreation Council and through these umbrella organizations, through your clubs, is critical. Being a part of the discussion helps us in our work in terms of advocating for and building the value of the sector. I'm sorry that's not a great answer because it's off the top of my head, but just stay engaged, work with us, and that communication working both ways, right? Letting your sort of club leadership know what's going on, and then sort of helping us to communicate back to them is really the critical work.
All right. Yeah, and I know the Outdoor Rec Council will stay on top of all of this and definitely continue to share any opportunities for outdoor clubs to get involved whenever that's an opportunity. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Please do keep an eye on your inboxes this week for an email from us with the recording of today's webinar, plus links and other materials. Thank you all for tuning in and asking so many questions. I apologize for not getting to them all and skipping some, and do my best trying to balance it all. So I apologize for anything we missed. And John, big thank you for you for being here and for being open to all the questions and doing your best to answer them all. I know it's not always easy. We get lots of specific ones, and sometimes it's not quite ready for that. As I mentioned earlier, we do regular webinars. Our next one is Tuesday, July 7th, and we'll have John Ribes from All Trails here to tell us how outdoor clubs can leverage the digital platform's data to make better stewardship decisions. To find out more about the webinar and everything else the Outdoor Recreation Council is doing, subscribe to our monthly newsletter at orcbc.ca. Finally, please stick around for the survey. It will load right after I stop talking. And we really do appreciate your input, so please do fill it out. With that, I will say good afternoon. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you again, John, and everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, all.
Bye.